Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to the webinar on Sklodowska-Curie Actions Postdoctoral Fellowship 2024 overview. The webinar is brought to you by Euraccess Australia and New Zealand, and it is great to see interest from researchers not only in Australia and New Zealand, but also from 56 other countries across the globe. Please allow me to introduce to you our esteemed guest speakers for today. First up, we have with us Dr. Anouk Lafortune, who is a policy officer in the MSCA unit of DG at the European Commission. Many thanks, Anouk, for joining us so early from Brussels. We also have with us Dr. Madeline Taylor, who is a lecturer at the Queensland University of Technology, and she's also a 2024 MSCA Postdoctoral Fellow. Thank you also, Madeline, for joining. And I'm Nishan Sanile, Regional Coordinator for Australia and New Zealand at Euraccess Worldwide. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Euraccess is an initiative of the European Commission that addresses barriers to the mobility of researchers and seeks to enhance scientific collaboration between Europe and the rest of the world. We provide key information about European research, career opportunities, international collaboration, and networking possibilities. As I always like to say, since all of you are watching this on your laptop or your phone, I'll encourage all of you to please type Euraccess Australia and New Zealand on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube and follow us there. I'd also encourage all of you to please use the Q&A function, not the chat function, in the interface to ask any questions that you might have while our speakers are presenting. We'll come back to take your questions after their presentation. And please note that we will provide you the recordings and the slide of the session. However, the recording will not include the Q&A, and hence I recommend you to stay for the entire duration if you want to hear responses for the common queries that applicants have. It's a perfect segue to now pass on the presenter privilege to Anouk, who is going to explain to you entirely about what MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowship is about and what you need to be aware when you are starting to think about putting forward a proposal. Over to you, Anouk. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Nishant. I'm just sharing my screen. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Well, good afternoon to you all, and very pleased to join you from Brussels today. I'm Anouk Lafortune. I'm a policy officer working in the Sklodowska-Curie Actions unit in the Directorate-General for Education, Youth, Sports and Culture of the European Commission. And what I was going to do today is give you a little bit of an overview of the MSCA program. And then go into so you understand a little bit the context and our objectives, and how this also is reflected obviously in the MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowships call. And then I'll go into more details on the specifics of the call itself. So if you haven't heard of us before, just for you to know, when we are one program, but we do not exist in isolation. We are part of a much bigger, larger European program for research and innovation. The current European program is called Horizon Europe. It runs from 2021 to 2027. The previous one, which you have maybe heard of it in the past before, it was called Horizon 2020, and it finished in 2020. And the MSCA in this large European framework program for research and innovation sits in the excellent science pillar. So the objectives of the program is to support and reinforce the excellence of the science of the science base in Europe, but also involving international collaboration. And to do that, obviously, we support excellent research projects in all fields of research. We're fully bottom up, but we also we support the excellent state-of-the-art frontier research projects, but also we support those who are carrying out the research. We support the researchers, their training, their skill building and career development throughout their career. So these are the two dual objectives of the program, is to support excellent science, but also support the training and career development of researchers. And one of the key tools that the program uses to achieve these objectives is mobility and collaboration. And when we talk about mobility and MSCA, we talk about international mobility and international collaborations, but also mobility across sectors, so from academia to other sectors, whether that's industry or civil society, public administrations, museums, hospitals, etc. And the third aspect of mobility for us is mobility across disciplines and interdisciplinary collaborations and work as well. So those are the kind of the three core objectives of the MSCA program. And we through our projects, we aim to have a more structuring institutional impact on the research and innovation sector. On one hand, the objective is to influence the way that have an impact on the training programs, for instance, that exist for researchers, but also on the collaborations that exist between academic organizations and outside, and both international and with other sectors as well. And on the other hand, the other objective is to have an impact by setting common standards, to have an impact on the working conditions and employment conditions of researchers in Europe as well. So those are the core objectives of the program. I just wanted to give you, Nishant with his poll gave you a little bit of an idea of the scale. We're talking about just for postdoctoral fellowships, but here also I had a slide to give you a little bit of an idea of the targets that we have for the overall program. Those are the figures from the previous European framework program from Horizon 2020, but we have similar objectives under Horizon Europe as well, so under the current 7 years program. And how we try to achieve our objectives in the MSCA, we have 5 main actions to achieve our both excellence and training and career development objectives. And these actions tend to follow the career stages of researchers, so that actually our actions support the different career that researchers at different stages and steps in their career. So we have first the doctoral networks, which is an action that supports the creation of international doctoral programs, which can be standard international doctorates, but we also have the possibility to do industrial doctorates and joint doctorate degrees as well. Then the second action, which is the one we're focusing on today, is the postdoctoral fellowship action. And this is not, here we support individual fellowships. So it's not a program, but we support individual researchers following their PhD award and early on in their career to carry out an excellent research project, and then develop as a researcher, learn new skills, develop networks, and so on as part of that experience. Then we have the staff exchanges action, which focuses on short-term mobility, and there it's open for researchers at any point of their career, and even to support staff, research managers, for example, or technicians, or various staff supporting the research and innovation activities of the project. And essentially, the staff exchange, as the name says, is that the MSCA essentially supports a collaborative research project. And what we support in the grant is the exchange of staff. So sending staff from a European university to Australia, to New Zealand, for example, as part of the collaborative project. We have a specific focus in staff exchanges on international exchanges and on also intersectoral, so mobility across outside academia as well. Then we have the co-fund action, and this is it's, as the name says, it's a co-funding program, which means that we that our grant provides part of the funding, but the beneficiary needs to find the rest of the funding for for setting up doctoral, but also postdoctoral programs. So here again, if you're interested in postdoc fellowships or in postdoctoral positions, then the co-fund action might also be of interest to you. And as an individual researcher, you can find all the vacancies of co-fund postdoctoral programs on our Access portal. So it's a requirement of our grant that all the vacancies from our projects, from co-fund and doctoral networks, they have to be advertised on our Access. And finally, we have a fifth action, MSc and Citizens, which is our science communication action. So every year we organize in September the European Researchers' Night. And then we also have researchers at school activities as well throughout the year. So this is the structure of the MSCA actions, just for you to know and maybe consider other opportunities for now or for the future. Moving on to the postdoc fellowship, which is why we're here today. As Nishant was saying, we usually in the last 3 years we funded around 1,200 projects on average per year, but this year we have a slightly bigger budget, so we will fund more projects in 2024 than we did in the last few calls. So as I was saying, the postdoc fellowship, it's an action that's a little bit different for MSCA, because there we don't fund a consortium of organization. We fund one researcher that applies together with the host organization and the supervisor in that host organization to carry out a research project. And through that research project, obviously, the objective is that the research itself has an impact, achieves, scientific impact or societal impact. But also, the objective of the project is for the researcher to develop as a researcher, acquire different skills, work in an interdisciplinary environment, or an intersectoral environment, or even an international environment, obviously, and acquire exposures, networks, and a wide range of benefits for the next steps in their career. The call the call has already opened. It opened last week on 23rd April, and it will close, as we already heard, on 11th of September 2024. So you have a little bit, still quite a bit of time to prepare the application, but I think always a good advice is to start early. I just wanted to give you a few figures on Australia and New Zealand participation in the past calls of the postdoc fellowships. So nearly 50 Australian researchers have so far been awarded a postdoc fellowship to come to Europe to do a research project. 7 from New Zealand. A very high success rate compared to average for these researchers. And we also have at the moment 17 European researchers that are hosted or will be hosted as part of the project in Australia, and 5 in New Zealand as part of a global fellowship. I'll cover the different types of fellowships we have in postdoc fellowships just after. In terms of the fields of research, the disciplines that we cover in the postdoc fellowships, we are bottom up and we cover all scientific fields. We do have 8 scientific panels that you need to choose from when you send your application, and actually the number of the way that we work is that our budget for the year is broken down by scientific panel on the basis of the number of proposals we've received per panel. So that means that essentially the share that each panel represents in terms of submissions is more or less equivalent to the share of projects that we will fund in these scientific panels per year. So here you see usually it's the social sciences and humanities that is our biggest panel, followed by life sciences, but also quite a lot of proposals from engineering, chemistry, physics, environment, and the 2 smallest panels are mathematics and economics. When you prepare your application, you need to choose between 2 options, two types of fellowships that we have under the postdoc fellowships. This is either the European Fellowship or the Global Fellowship. Now, the European Fellowship is open to researchers from any nationality, from anywhere in the world, for them to come and carry out a research project in a new country or a country associated to Horizon Europe. This is most of the fellowships that we fund, actually, the biggest part of the budget. And the European Fellowship is up to 2 years of budget. The other option is a global fellowship, but this basically the objectives for the program to set up a global fellowship is to give the opportunity for European researchers to acquire experience, access to certain infrastructures, working with teams outside of the EU in a third country, and then bring that knowledge, that experience, that network back to their European institution. So that means that the global fellowship, there is a bit of a restriction, there is more of a restriction in terms of the nationalities of researchers that can participate in this action. And essentially it's limited to either EU or in fact, to European nationals or to long-term residents in Europe. And the fellowship will fund up to 2 years for them to spend in a host institution in a third country, and then a 1 year compulsory return phase in their host institution in Europe. So, two options that in these you need to decide from the moment that you prepare your application, and bear in mind that the Global Fellowships has certain restrictions. But if you are representing an Australian organization thinking of wanting to supervise a postdoc fellow, for instance, well, the Global Fellowship is an option also that would be interesting for you and allow you to host a postdoc fellow for up to 2 years. Now, the other options that you have with the fellowship is it's possible to do secondments during your fellowship. So that means that it's time that you can spend seconded from your main host institution to other institutions anywhere in the world and in any sector that you want. The secondments should be should be mentioned in the proposal, and you should emphasize on what is the added value of these secondments? How they're contributing to your research objectives, to your development as a researcher, skill development, etc., etc. And you can do. There's a limit of duration that you can be on secondment for during your fellowship, 1/3 of your fellowship. But then, other than that, there is plenty of flexibility to also do just one secondment or to have several secondment partners. Another option is the non-academic placement. And this is a bit more restrictive than secondments, but it has an added value, which is that the period that you spend in a non-academic placement is added to the period of your grant. So essentially, you can go up to 6 months at the end of your project to do a non-academic placement, and that means that you get, let's say, 2 years for European fellowship plus 6 years. 6 months, just 6 months to do your non-academic placement in an organization in Europe. We have quite a broad definition of non-academic, but obviously it's an organization that is universities are excluded and organizations whose primary activity is research are also not included in and also not eligible for a non-academic placement. And obviously the objective of the placement is partly for you to gain experience as a fellow in another sector in Europe, but also to explore possibilities to use the results of your research outside of academia, and what are the options to valorize the results of the research you've carried out beyond in other sectors, for policy making, in industry, for commercialization, for innovation, etc., etc. This it's very important, and it's a compulsory that if you want a non-academic placement, it needs to be in your proposal, and you cannot add it later. And obviously, in the proposal, you really need to highlight how this non-academic placement contributes to your research project, to the impact of your project, and to your development as a researcher as well. The non-academic placement is restricted to non-academic hosts, obviously, but also to organizations based in Europe. This is a little summary, but I won't cover it now in terms of definition of what we mean by non-academic sector. And you'll see that, as I was saying earlier, the definition is very broad. And this is a summary of the differences between secondment and non-academic placement. You'll get the PowerPoint later, so it's just for you to get that comparison eventually. Now, moving on to the eligibility conditions for the call. There are specific eligibility conditions both for the researcher and for the participating organizations, obviously. I'll start with the organizations and then move on to the researchers. For the organizations, all projects submitted, all proposals submitted must have at least one organization that is based in either EU member state or a country associated to Horizon Europe. And this organization is your beneficiary. It's the organization that will recruit you. It's the organization that signs the grant agreement with us. And so when you submit, you must have that beneficiary and the supervisor in that beneficiary organization identified. If you're doing a global fellowship, you obviously need already a host organization in the third country that will be an associated partner in the third country. And that organization must submit a letter of commitment together with the proposal that you're submitting to make it to finalize the proposal. I keep talking about EU member states and associated countries and third countries. So I've put a slide here with the summary with the list of countries that are now associated to Horizon Europe. The United Kingdom, as of January 2024, is now fully associated to the program. And so you can apply with a UK host like any other EU member states or associated countries from now on. For the individual researchers, as I was mentioning earlier, there are no restrictions for nationality for European fellowships. So the European fellowships are open to researchers from anywhere in the world of any nationality. For the global fellowship, there is a restriction, and it's only open. The global fellowship is only open for nationals or long-term residents of Horizon Europe associated countries or EU member states, of course. In addition to this, there are also other eligibility conditions for researchers. For one, it's a postdoc fellowship, so you must be in the possession of a PhD or have defended it successfully, no corrections, no nothing left, by the call deadline, which is 11th of September this year. Also, you cannot have you can't have more than 8 years of research experience since your PhD, with exceptions. For instance, for time that you haven't been doing research. So, for example, for time for parental leave, for example, career breaks, time that you spent working outside of research in other sectors. So, quite a lot of exceptions. The next slide actually gives you a list of the different exceptions of the time that you can extract from those 8 years. We also have a mobility rule in almost all MSCA actions, and that rule is that I think it's easier to read. I will to read yourself, but I will still explain it briefly. But essentially, the mobility rule in postdoctoral fellowship is that you cannot have lived or carried out your main activity in the country of the host of the European fellowship, or in the case of global fellowship, the third country host, for more than 12 months in the last 3 years before the call deadline. So something to bear in mind when you're trying to identify a partner for a postdoc fellowship application. As I was mentioning, I have this next slide, which gives you a list of exceptions from the 8-year research experience. And also there are tools or useful materials that have been published on our executive agency website to help you if in doubt whether you meet or not the 8-year research experience. There are guidelines, and there's also a self-assessment tool, obviously. So this is, if you're in doubt, you can use these tools to double check. Obviously, the final decision will be made after you've submitted your proposal. There is also another eligibility condition or restriction on resubmissions. And this resubmission rule applies only if you have submitted a proposal last year, so in the postdoctoral 2023 call, and if you had a score below 70% last year. And in that case, you cannot resubmit this year. So it only affects this year. And what we mean by resubmission in MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowships has nothing to do with the content of your research itself, but it has to do with the partners involved. So you cannot essentially submit a proposal with the same host organizations. So you need to change the partnership. You need to change either the European host for European Fellowship or the global or the global host in a postdoc fellowship. So this is it for the resubmission rule. I wanted to mention that if you're considering applying to a postdoctoral fellowship with an institution that is based in what we call a widening country, and the list is on the right-hand side of the slide, that you can opt in to be considered when you submit your application to MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowships. You can opt in to be considered for the ERA Fellowships call. And this is available only for European fellowships. But essentially, it gives the chances for those proposals with a host in a widening country that had submitted a very good proposal, but unfortunately, due to budget constraints, we couldn't fund through the MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowships. Well, they will be then considered for the ERA Fellowships call. And essentially, the call sets up the same condition as MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowship for the funding. So it's the same funding amount. The difference is that it's an ERA fellowship and not an MSCA fellowship, but it gives you an extra chance of funding. So you can have a look at the list on the right-hand side in case it might concern you. But do opt in at the application stage to make sure that you are considered for the ERA fellowship if your application is indeed eligible for it. Now, the award criteria for the postdoc fellowships, I'm not going to go through all the sub-criteria, but just to say that essentially the call, and this is in the call description, it's in our work program, so you can find this table, and obviously your proposal will be assessed on the basis of those 3 criteria and sub-criteria. We do have weights for the 3 criteria. So the main criteria is excellence, which is weighted 50% of the score. Then there is impact, which is weighted 30% of the score. And here, as you can see in the sub-criteria, we're not just considering the impact of the research project, but also the impact on the researcher's training and career development opportunities and employability after the postdoc fellowship. And finally, the 3rd criteria is quality and efficiency of the implementation, and it weighs 20% of the total score. I'll move on to a little bit more on the evaluation, just for you to know. In the past few years, we've received around 7,000, 8,000 proposals per year. Now, with the increased budget that we have this year, we expect slightly more proposals. And we have, in previous years, had a success rate of varying between 15 and 16%. We mobilize a lot of experts, international, from different disciplines, different sectors also. working on the evaluation of your proposal. So there will be an expert for in your fields, or there will be expertise, interdisciplinary expertise if need be. It takes time, though, to evaluate such a large number of proposals. So it takes 5 months, more or less, to finalize the evaluation process. So considering the call deadline is the 11th of September, do not expect any news on the results of the evaluation before sometime around February 2025, next year. So be patient. And I put a link in case some of you may be interested to sign up as an expert for Horizon Europe calls. You have the link on the slide. If it's a very competitive call, as you've seen, about 15-16% success rate overall. Which is why we've set up an MSCA Seal of Excellence scheme. Essentially, the Seal of Excellence is given to proposals that could not be funded because of budget constraint, but that achieved a score of 85% or more. So excellent proposals, but unfortunately, we don't have the budget to fund them. They receive the Seal of Excellence, and it's a quality label that applicants can use to find another source of funding. And actually, there have been a lot of dedicated schemes that have been set up in different EU countries or associated countries, just really dedicated to Seal of Excellence holders, MSCA Seal of Excellence holders. And these can be national schemes, it can be regional, or it can be individual institutions that have such schemes to support, to fund the MSCA Seal of Excellence holders. So I've put a link on the slide, and you'll get the PowerPoint after. But it's worth looking at your options there if you're awarded a Seal of Excellence. In terms of the grant that you received, this is a bit the breakdown of what you get. Essentially, you get an amount per month for different costs. And so we have a living allowance for the researcher, which has just increased in 2024. And all researchers funded, all the postdoc fellows get a living allowance and a mobility allowance. And then, if eligible, a family allowance and other potentially allowances during the course of the project. But the main ones that all fellows get are the living allowance and the mobility allowance. Bear in mind that the living allowance is an amount before any deduction, national, social security coverage, income taxes, etc. And also there is a country correction coefficient that is applied on the living allowance taking into account the cost of living in different countries. So the amount that you get can be quite different from will necessarily be a little bit different from what is in the grant. The other funding or cost that you get covered by the grant, which is worth mentioning here, is the research, training, and networking contribution. So you receive €1,000 for research, training, and networking activities. So this is for you as a fellow to use to carry out your research. So if it's field work or paying equipment, if it's to go on conferences or short visits, for training activities that you might want to do that are not offered, for instance, at your host institution. This is supposed to there is an amount budgeted for to cover these costs. I'm coming to the end, but here, and this is more for you to know, and so I won't go into details, but for you to know some of the obligations or the commitments if you are successful. And I just wanted to highlight the MSCA information package that gives you summarizes the right and obligations of research fellows. Also, our MSCA guidelines on supervision and our MSCA Green Charter, which sets principles to ensure that the research carried out is as environmentally friendly as possible. So the call is open and will close on 11th September 2024. You will find on the call page all the relevant documents. So this is the MSCA work program, the guide for applicants, all the support materials for calculating the ATS exceptions, etc. On the call page. So I invite you to really have a look. And if you're still looking for host organizations, there are a few useful tools to use, depending on the type of organizations you're looking for. Like if you're looking for a non-academic partner for placement, Enterprise Europe Network can be of help. And we have our own MSCA matchmaking platform as well, where you can create your profile or look for existing organizations' profile to try to find a good match. Useful contacts. Obviously, MSCA national contact points, either in Europe or in your, there is one for Australia, for instance. Marie Curie Alumni Association also is a useful network to be aware of, and Access, obviously. And I will finish here. Thank you very much. And I will stop sharing.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anouk. I think that was a very detailed and very concrete session on what is MSCA Postdoctoral Fellowship all about. I think it was very clear for those who were looking at it for the first time what exactly it entails. Of course, after you are aware of the eligibility and all the stuff, you can then decide if you want to proceed with the application. Just before we move on to the next presentation, I wanted to mention that we will do an application advice webinar on 21st May, but more information on this later. Just to give you some teaser and to understand better what goes into a successful proposal, we are very fortunate that we have with us Dr. Madeline Taylor. Madeline is a very recent fellow from Australia who has received a European fellowship to go to Finland to do her postdoc. Welcome to the session, Madeline, and over to you to share some useful tips and advice for those who are prospective applicants this year.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to be part of this presentation. So I just quickly want to acknowledge that I'm joining you from unceded Turrbal and Yagara lands this afternoon. I'm a PhD, recently received my PhD from University of Melbourne, and I teach and lecture at Queensland University of Technology in fashion. And my background is a costume practitioner and artist. And so my research really focuses on costume practice, design collaboration, and for fashion sustainability. And one of the reasons that I specifically wanted to apply for the Marie Curie was because the funding landscape is very different for arts funding in Australia. So I was kind of, this scheme is so amazing because it offers, funding for the kind of research like mine, which probably wouldn't get a look in necessarily in Australia. I also was keen to apply because I wanted to grow my international profile, and also kind of looking towards the future, wanted to kind of grow my institutional profile at QUT. The Marie Curie fellowships are probably not as well known in Australia as they should be. So when I was awarded, I kind of need to really emphasize to my institution how big a deal this was, but they quickly got on board and realized, lots of people at the kind of higher levels understood it, but maybe my colleagues weren't so kind of conscious of the scheme. So kind of one of the things to kind of recognize is that you might need to kind of really emphasize that. And when I was looking to kind of do this project or kind of apply for Marie Curie, I was looking around at different host organizations and decided to apply for Aalto University, which is in Finland. It's in Helsinki. And one of my colleague who's kind of been a bit of an informal mentor for my last kind of 5 years of career works there. And so I kind of approached her, Sophia Pantavaki, and asked her if she would be keen to be a mentor. And she was very excited about the idea of me coming to join her in her costume research centre. So it was really about kind of institutional fit and particularly kind of my supervisory fit. But she has worked really hard to build costume research at Aalto, and now kind of is one of the leading costume research groups in Europe. So there was a really kind of natural fit there. My project is really about kind of 3D printing and digital technologies in costume practice. And it's looking at how these kind of two kind of technologies are being domesticated or applied in the field. And it's really looking at kind of a research justice project because costume isn't necessarily considered technically innovative. So there's kind of a feminist angle that I'm taking on this project. And the project for me is fantastic in that it's training me not just in kind of the technologies, but it's also giving me a lot of soft skills in terms of research leadership, and kind of applying different theories from kind of social and science and technology theories into my field. And one of the things I wanted to kind of just mention as well is my project's only 13 months. So, you know, the kind of your projects can vary from 12 to 24 months. Mine is on the shorter side and it still got funded. So if that's something to know. But the other thing I would emphasize is that really it's your project. So while my host was really supportive of writing it and giving me feedback, I was the one who was driving the project kind of focus, kind of the energy to get it submitted, all of that stuff. It really kind of relies on you. In terms of preparing the proposal, allow a lot of time. I kind of looked at all of my Word documents of the various drafts, and I added up that I'd spent about 120 hours just on the writing over kind of 3 months, which is like 3 weeks full time. And then, of course, I probably would have spent at least another week reading literature for my project, reading kind of information about the scheme and all the kind of information that kind of informs the structuring and the kind of judgment on the fellowship, meetings and feedback and forms and things like that. So just kind of allow that it's going to take kind of maybe 4 weeks full time. That's what it was for me. Over the 3 months, obviously you couldn't write it all in just like 1 month straight. You need that time to kind of develop the ideas, get feedback and things like that. I just want to really quickly present some big picture stuff around writing the proposal and then also some really practical tips. The proposal itself will have 3 parts. So there's B1, B2 and part A, and definitely the B1 is the most critical thing, and so it's going to take the longest time. One of the tips that I got, and I'm kind of collating a lot of information I got and received in advice from other places, including this seminar last year, so I'm paying it forward, was really to the importance of crafting a compelling narrative about why this project now, what your kind of how you're being state of the art, how are you breaking new ground and being really ambitious with your project, and kind of providing that structure to kind of talk to the overarching grant application. So this kind of structure follows the overall grant application, and also the structure kind of follows for your introduction as well. So you kind of need to contextualize your field or topic for a general audience, but then hone in really quickly. State your problem, set its significance, and then outline your main idea and its impact. And I want to make sure that you understand addressing a general audience is really important because people who are assessing this aren't necessarily going to be in your field. So when you're going to get feedback on your proposal, really make sure you get feedback from people who aren't in your field as well. When the kind of as part of this big picture for the B1 section, the excellence is like the crucial bit, as Anouk said. So put all your important bits in there. If you kind of put like important information in implementation, it's only worth 20%, it kind of might get a bit lost. So really make sure that you're kind of all the crucial bits are in your excellence section. You're going to have really clear objectives, and these are going to inform your work packages, which are effectively different stages of your methodology, your data collection, your analysis, your expected results, how you share those. And there's all these different sections and headings that you should use that kind of they give you in the template, but effectively know that interdisciplinarity is excellence, gender dimension is excellence, open science is excellence, and that might kind of, so you have to address all of those. When it comes to the impact section, I know I'm coming from the arts, so I was a little bit kind of bemused to call my work science, but effectively in this kind of proposal, science is the academics stuff. So any kind of research outcomes or research findings is your science. And the economic impacts, again, because I'm arts, it was a little tricky to kind of think about this, but it could just be about saving money or time, but not just kind of generating income. Just onto the B1 practicalities. They have like a really fantastic template. Use those, use the headings. I would recommend using bold to kind of emphasize key terms in your introduction. So you can kind of provide basically like an abstract there. So you're bolding. And also use visuals and tables to kind of provide like illustrate your work. Use consistent terms. The MSc scheme has a glossary, and you need to make sure you're using those terms the same way. And also know that you've got really limited space. It's like 10 pages. So really need to hone in your message, use like acronyms, have really limited references because they take up a lot of space, but also really emphasize your kind of contributions and your supervisor's contributions to the field to kind of show that you're that excellent researcher. Moving on to the B2 part, it's about establishing your quality as a researcher and establishing the quality of your supervision. So effectively, it's basically your CV and then kind of like a CV of your institution and your post. I really encourage you to get your CV done early and then get advice on how to strengthen this. Show your ambition here and also add details for like the international audience. So for example, mention that it's a leading national journal, or if it's Q1 or whatever, that's a competitive award in your field, because the people in the EU who are going to be assessing these might not necessarily recognize the stuff that's happening in Australia. And also think about when you're doing the Green Charter section, that can be a project design and also your institutional credentials. So I talked about like Zoom interviews rather than traveling for kind of data collection. In the part A, it's very practical stuff, but really you can use it to your advantage because you've got such limited pages. I kind of talked, there's an ethics section. I'm doing data collection with human subjects. So I use that to kind of demonstrate my thoroughness. I really talked about data transfer back to Australia once my project had finished. I met with, ethics people from my local institution, so I could kind of talk to the ethics scheme that I'll be working under there. Another point is these kind of descriptors or keywords that you use in the part A. Effectively, these are kind of like what we consider FOR codes in Australia. So you can kind of break down and get a sense of like how the EU structures their disciplines. And I use this to kind of show my interdisciplinarity. So I had arts and then history of ideas and then science and technology theories. So kind of cutting across those disciplines using those keywords. And the other thing to know is that there's lots of support available, and you need to start your application early and use all the support available. So I had support from my home institution, QT, so grant support, writing and editing support. I had local mentors who kind of were reviewing my application, and people in and out of my field reviewing my application. And then I also had a lot of support from my host institution, Aalto. So they kind of linked me in. They ran their own kind of guidance schemes on this. They gave me ethics help. They provided copies, my mentor provided copies of past successful applications, which was incredibly valuable. My mentor also gave me lots of guidance on my project. As you work with them, when you start to work with them, I'd ask them, like, your mentor, how many times they want to see it or how much time they have to devote to it, because just like writing a PhD application, there's like, it's got to be your own project, and they might have limited time. And I also got support from their faculty with kind of writing support, summaries of institutional information. So there's a lot of information that is in the application that the host needs to provide. So kind of any of that stuff you can be kind of feeding onto them to get support on. And then there was kind of general support I accessed through like Facebook groups or forums, UXs, of course, and then past recipients. I would really encourage you to get copies of past grant applications that were successful, because these are so helpful in understanding the tone and the structure and what you include. And I've also, I'm happy to share my application, my B1 section, with anybody here, because I just think it's such a helpful thing to have and takes so much of the pressure off, to know what you're doing. So yeah, that's it. Whoosh.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madeline. I think it is a lot of motivation to a lot of the people who are watching, because for all of you who are watching this, Madeline was also watching this last year in her office or somewhere before she actually got the fellowship this year. So it is very possible that one of you who is watching, or multiple of you who is watching, will eventually end up getting a fellowship. And also thank you very much for the offer to share your B1. For all of you who are attending, we will send our B1 together with the slides so that you have access to it, and you have a sort of a head start compared to a lot of others who do not have access to such slides. So I think with that, a big thank you to both Anouk and Madeline for taking their time. I'm sure that the audience found it very informative, very useful. I think this was the right amount of information that was necessary to understand if you are actually eligible, what sort of efforts goes into this very prestigious postdoctoral fellowship. There is, of course, as I mentioned, a webinar that is dedicated to application advice on 21st May. So if you want to delve deeper into things that you should consider while writing a successful proposal, please do not forget to join us then. As always, of course, we will be in touch once the registration is announced. A quick request: when you exit the webinar, there are going to be 2 survey questions that we request you to answer. It will take you like 10 seconds. And to wrap up, I think please allow me to reiterate to keep an eye on our social media platforms to get notified of news and events from the European research landscape. With that, it brings us to the end of today's session. A big thank you to both Anouk and Madeline for taking our time. And with that, I sign off and wish you a good week ahead. Thank you very much for joining us from different parts of the world. Thank you.